ourselves, because someone might say, well, I'll work in the wrong field and mess up my material and spiritual life, but it'll be for the greater good. But we'll see here that when we work in the wrong field, we damage society. You know what? Can you rinse this off? It's sticky. And then I get sticky on my hands. And I get sticky on my hands.
There's a story about the man who came to realize the power of chanting the holy name of God.
That's lovely.
So, we have one question. So,
you can have 5 questions. All right. So this is part of ethical and meaningful work of value. And this is a verse that Krishna says twice in the Bhagavad Gita, once in chapter 3 and once in chapter 18. And usually when a teacher repeats something, especially also at the end, it's completely significant. And we'll see, thank you so much, and we'll see that he uses the same 2 lines here. Shreyan Swadharma Viguna, Paradama Swanustitat, the same 2 lines there. That when we go in someone else's path, even if apparently we are an expert in the information and craft of the path, it's dangerous. And we talked about the danger to ourselves, that we have to pretend to be someone that we're not, and even actors can't do that all the time. And Krishna says, then our work becomes bhayavaha, a vehicle of fear. And we talked about the ways in which that happens for ourselves personally. Okay? When I'm doing someone else's work, I become very attached to the externals, and I get very afraid if the externals are threatened. When I'm doing my own work, it's an expression of myself. I'm satisfied with the work, and it's very easy to give Krishna the externals to work for him. When I'm doing someone else's work, my mind is my enemy. Like when I do work in the field of government, which I'm very good at, my mind the whole time will go, why isn't someone else doing this? Who are the people that are supposed to be doing this? Where are they? Why aren't they doing this? If I'm doing work in the field of artistry, then I'm thinking, no one really appreciates this. Who's even going to see? Who's even going to care? That never happens when I'm doing work in my own field. My mind is so much my friend, I hardly even notice any problem from it. And when we're doing work in our own field, then we feel energized and enlivened. When we're doing work in others' fields, then we're depleted. We constantly stop what we're doing. Right? We procrastinate. We have to take frequent breaks. Right? Miss deadlines. And now look what happens in society. So crossing government and resources, what is similar about these 2 fields? No. Control, yes. Expansive. They're expansive fields. People then want to expand. Right? What's different?
One is for the welfare of others, and others.
Well, they're all the fields are for the welfare of others. But how you're defining others, in government you're looking at the whole society. In resources, you're looking at one particular flow in the society. You're trying to create, in resources, you want to create sustainable and regenerative wealth in the society. If you're just interested in yourself, you're not following Dharma. That's true and true. Okay?
in resources you are like creating the desires, like not creating the desire, but modifying by advertisements or something like.
Well, if you're doing your Dharma, your advertisement should be actually meeting real needs. Remember, we talked about doing work of value. You shouldn't be creating artificial or manufactured needs. When people with the mentality of resources work in the field of government, they're going to have difficulty thinking of the long-term interests of the public. They're going to be more concerned with their own domain. and they may try to profit off of government. Or they may go into government and then work to have the laws be favorable to their own industry, so then when they leave government, they can go back into their industry with better laws. Now, a really good example of what happens when people with the mentality of resources work in government is in America we have, in some places, private prisons. So where people are running prisons as a business. Now what's the problem with that? Are the people running prisons as a business, do they want the prisoners to be rehabilitated?
I think you've got the most incarceration of any country in the world in the US.
Yeah, but particularly private prisons are really a problem. Do they want the prisoners after they're released to come back? Or do they want them to be good? Yeah, they want repeat customers. Are they going to be wanting to put money and resources into educating, rehabilitating, helping the prisoners? Whereas if someone in government is thinking about the benefit, these are also their citizens. All right, what about when people with mentality of government work in resources? So they're going to tend to prioritize people, which sounds lovely. Put people over projects. But when you're in a business, if you do that, what's going to happen? Your business is going to fail. You're not going to be able to supply the people, either your customers or your employees. Now, people in government are mostly concerned with honor, fairness, and justice, and they're willing to sacrifice their life for that. But in resources, you have to think about expanding profits and expanding wealth. Sometimes what happens when government-minded people go into resources is they give all the profits away to social justice causes. And again, the business fails. I think one of the primary examples of the harm of this was in the former Soviet Union when the government took over agriculture and business. And the food was rotting in the fields, and people were starving. I mean, government people may also define a fair price in such a way, well, I'm going to define a fair price in such a way that it's going to benefit disadvantaged people. And again, they're not going to make the business sustainable, and then people don't get the raw materials of food and clothing and construction materials and medicines and everything like that that the field is meant to provide. Crossing government and ideas. So what's similar about these fields?
Innovations.
I think there's innovations in all four fields.
Idealistic? Are they idealistic?
Idealistic? Could be, yeah. This is the system thinkers, the visionaries of society are mostly in these fields. Okay. Long-range vision, whole systems. What's different?
What's different is that one of those two things, they want truth for the sake. There's the second people they just want organisation, and it's not necessarily the main thing for them. Let's
The degree of
More practical-minded.
the degree of entanglement, the degree of entanglement,
Entanglement?
like attachment, rather like the thinker would be more aloof or more.
There's more, yes. The person in the field of government has to be more practical-minded. And so their understanding of knowledge has to be more practical rather than detached and theoretical. Yes. Okay.
One
So-
is working for justice and one is working for truth.
Yes. So when people with the mentality of ideas work in government, now one of the qualities of the Dharma of the field of ideas is mercy. This is a big problem we have in our Hare Krishna. When people with the mentality of ideas work in government, they tend to be soft on crime. They don't have this urge for justice. You can be forgiven. You can be forgiven. When people with the mentality of ideas work in government, talking about detachment, ideas people are going to think that rah-rah political loyalty is stupid. But if you don't have political loyalty, your country falls apart. People have to be enthused to sacrifice and work for their collective good. But to people and ideas, it's like, rah-rah, my country? Who has a country? Everybody has a country. Everything belongs to God. Who's the rah-rah, my country? And it's going to be very difficult for them to enthuse people in what they need to be enthused in order for things to go on. When ideas people work in government, ideas people often like to research and research and research more and research more before making a decision. But in government, you often need to make decisions very quickly with only a portion of the information. Are you coming in, or are you going out, or are you just simply there distracting everybody?
Oh, sorry. Just a bit late.
But then come in. You'll be much less distracting if you just come in and sit. Otherwise, it's like, look at the man in the doorway. So they're going to have great difference. This is another problem we have in our devotee society. That decisions need to be made. There's people who need action taken now. And the government, they're willing to take strong action on incomplete information. But ideas people, well, we gotta wait, we need another study, we need another paper, we need another research, 20 years have gone by, that's all right, we need some more research, another 5 years, another 10 years.
Thousands of dollars will be spent doing that.
Yes. What happens when government people work in ideas? They tend to politicize knowledge. So think about, when people with the mentality of government write the history books. They'll distort knowledge for political purposes, which damages faith in the field of ideas. People will think, well, we can't trust what's coming out of the field of ideas because it's been politicized. When people with the mentality of government work in the field of ideas. So in government, people are more comfortable with a more hierarchical structure. Think about like the military. In ideas, people are very free-flowing. Like when I got my PhD, so after I got my PhD, I went to the chair of my dissertation committee, and, oh, thank you, Dr. English, and he said, no. He said, now that you're a doctor, I'm not Dr. English to you anymore. I'm just Fenwick. Mm-hmm. So this concept of a peer, isn't it? A very peer relationship for the free flow of knowledge. And when people with the mentality of government work in ideas, they can try to impose a hierarchical structure that dams this natural free flow of ideas. When people with the mentality of government work in ideas, they may find it hard to be energized and enthused by the detachment of the field. They're not getting their proper nourishment, and so they may not really put their effort into the work. Crossing ideas and resources. So what's similar about these fields? They're both unsentimental fields. They're not sentimental. You follow? Huh? What's different?
It's profit oriented as well.
One cares for society and the other one
Oh my God. You're definitely not in that field. All right. Which field do you think doesn't care for society?
Sometimes I think ideas, if they are creating some atom bomb, for example,
Well, that's a corruption.
but it came out of an idea like we can do this.
Well, that's a corruption. That means that they're not cherishing their fields. Their field. Remember we talked yesterday about the prejudices? Yeah? Thank you. So what's the difference? The difference is a different understanding of ethics, isn't it? What is actually ethical? So work in ideas appears theoretical and useless. It is not doing anything for society. To those in resources and to those in ideas, the work in resources appears selfish.
I think progress also not in harmony with nature. And
For who?
path of progress, the way it's leading, I think.
Well, we're not
Harmony
talking
with
about
nature.
corruption. We're talking about, ideally, the field of people in the field of resources and ideas should cherish their field.
Like you were saying that one of them is like the resources people have their dharma is lying, so that and.
Okay, looking at how you define honesty. What's the ethics of honesty? Yes. That's also true with government and ideas. So if we go back for a minute to government and ideas. So let's go back to the beginning of slide here. Government and ideas. So in government ideas, you also have this problem. That people with the mentality of ideas just want to give a straightforward thing. And if they're working in government, they're going to cause a war. And people in government who have the mentality of government, if they go into ideas, they're going to present things diplomatically instead of the straight truth. And therefore people won't have any trust in what's coming out of the field. Okay, so let's look at ideas and resources. Yes, we have the same sort of problem. Ideas, people working in resources. So they don't really want to take, there's no way you can see what I'm doing. And we care about you. You see, we genuinely care, even from there. Is there some place where this gentleman can sit? Yes, that's what, I didn't even know you were there. All right. There's even a cushion for you here.
I had a question. He had one already.
He has one already?
Yeah.
Fully equipped. Okay. So people in the field of ideas, they're going to have a very difficult time relating to the ethics of the field of resources. I helped a god sister of mine for a while with her business, and I felt very contaminated that I was getting paid and commission for selling these like hand lotions and things. It was a completely legitimate, valuable business, but I was always feeling disgusted with this. When people with the mentality of ideas work in resources, they're going to tend to want to give everything away. I have a friend of mine who, after seeing this, she said, okay, I'm running a business because I thought I had to do that to earn money, but I'm definitely in ideas, and I hate selling stuff. I just want to give it all away. Again, then your business fails. Everyone starts. So ideas people may be fine with a little garden, but, running a big thing and employing people, they just don't want to do it. Resources people working in ideas. So they're going to twist knowledge for profit. Think about pharmaceutical companies that fund research into their pharmaceuticals. And again, we have a similar problem as when people with the mentality of government work in ideas. That not only is that particular research contaminated, but people's faith in the field of ideas is damaged. See, we expect that an advertisement isn't entirely truthful, right? We expect. But we don't expect that scientific research or philosophy is skewed. And something we talk about in the book is having a clear line in a newspaper between what's an advertisement and what's journalism. Sometimes it's not so clear, like I'm a little thing, advertisement. To keep that line. And in some newspapers, they have the commercial, advertisement thing on a different floor from the journalists to keep this separation. People with the mentality of resources working in ideas. So in America, we say impractical things are like pies and stuff. Now please listen very carefully. So someone with the mentality of ideas is going to feel like running a business, making a profit isn't ethical. They should just give everything away. People with the mentality of resources are going to think that spending money and human power, etc., on theoretical research that doesn't make any money is unethical. Do you follow? They're going to think, why should we fund 15 years of research into this theoretical scientific thing that has no financial profit possibility. This is an unethical use of money. Clear? And so that part of the field of ideas will get elected. Okay, crossing ideas and artistry. What's similar about these things?
Unexpensive.
Not expensive, satisfying. The fields of satisfaction. Okay, what's different?
One is giving pleasure to society, another is being detached.
Yes, one is providing all the pleasures of society and one is giving detached wisdom. Excellent. Okay, what happens with people with the mentality of artistry working ideas? Well, ideas is the most abstract of the four fields. Artistry is the least, it's the most concrete. You know what's a good table. Is this a good table? Is it not a good table? People with the mentality of artistry, and we see this also in our Hare Krishna movement. People with the mentality of artistry often really struggle with nuance, context. It says this here. Oh, but it also says this here. What about this here? What about this? But it says this here. But what about the... No, it says this here. They miss the subtleties of knowledge. And they distort knowledge, not intentionally, but they distort knowledge because they want to see things in a very concrete way. People with the mentality of artistry working in ideas. So artistry provides all the pleasures of society, all the rasas. You can think of them as being like the salt and the spices of life. But ideas is the vision of life. They can sensualize knowledge, philosophy, religion, which is like putting salt and spices in the eyes of society. When people with the mentality of artistry work in ideas, they can think most of the work is completely impractical, like crossword puzzles, it's just some hobby. They can neglect a lot of the most important work of the field. When people with the mentality of artistry work in ideas, their nature is to please and to serve. And now they have to give detached wisdom that people might not like. And this may have a huge inner conflict for them. And how can I tell people things that are true but are not going to immediately make them happy? Now, because people with the mentality of artistry are satisfied by basic creature comforts and the basic things of this world, along with the desire to please and serve others, they're prime candidates for corruption in the field of ideas. So if someone says, well, it'll please me if you give this and this report and I can give you some money for that in a comfortable place, they may tend to go towards that. It's like a prime situation for a fire of corruption. When people with the mentality of artistry work in ideas, their interest is in upholding the status quo. They're foundation people. And in ideas, you have to challenge the status quo. They may really have a hard time doing that. They may avoid doing the research and study and publishing and teaching that is going to challenge the foundation of society that they by nature want to uphold. When people with the mentality of ideas work in artistry, oh boy, now I got to please the customer and the client. I got to do things the way they want to do it. But that's not the way people in ideas are wired at all. So they may procrastinate, they may be insubordinate, fail to meet deadlines. When people with the mentality of ideas work in artistry, they don't have their space. They don't have their intellectual, creative space to function. And they may not be able to function with the deadlines and the constraints that are put upon. When I first stayed overnight in a temple, the devotees asked me to make a garland for the deities, so I did. And they said it was supposed to be symmetrical. And I said, I don't mind it. When people with the mentality of ideas work in artistry, they may not understand how the field is supposed to supply the sensual pleasures of society. Ideas people tend to be very detached. So they may suck all the beauty out of it. I have one devotee friend who definitely should work in the field of ideas, and he works as an electrician. and he told me a few months ago, he said, Urmila, you're right, that people in the field of artistry want to create beauty for society. He said, the electricians make the wires in the box for they're beautiful. He said, but I think this is completely stupid. I said, yeah, you're not supposed to be working in that field. So ideas people may suck all the pleasure out of life. Have you ever seen that happen? Don't enjoy it. People with the mentality of ideas working in artistry, now the opposite thing can happen. The ideas people can get drawn into the sensual nature of the field. Now because ideas people tend to be very mentally active, when they're drawn into the sensual nature, they may use their natural intelligence and mental activity for sensual harm. And we can think about food scientists who make processed foods where they study what makes you eat more, like what combination of fats and sugars and salts and crunch make you keep eating and eating and eating and eating, and they manufacture foods like that. Or they may go into advertisement where they manipulate people's psychology in order to get them to buy more. This is a prime example of the idle mind being a devil's workshop. People with the mentality of ideas going into artistry, they're really going to find it hard to please their customers and their clients, their patrons. And they may end up doing things that don't please them. They're going to end up just disappointing them and not actually having this proper service mood of the field of artistry. Government and artistry. All right, what's similar about these fields? Yes, they're directly involved with serving people. And what's different?
One is expensive and
Excellent. One is expensive, one is satisfying. When people with the mentality of artistry work in government, so this is the fog of war. You can make your plans for the battle, but when it hits the ground, you have to make decisions based on very incomplete information. You have to be able to think very abstractly. But people in artistry have a hard time thinking abstractly. They think concretely. They don't know what to do. They're just, okay, I've just got to follow the rule book. You know, your soldiers are going to get killed. When people with the mentality of artistry work in government, oh my goodness, taking care of all these flows of people and needs and this and that, it's hard for them to do that kind of work, and they may neglect a lot of that work. We brought this up yesterday about bureaucracy. We need some bureaucrats in government. I mean, you need people who just say what's in the rule book and this is the law and you have to follow the law. But if artistry people are actually doing the work of government, they tend to turn the whole government into a bureaucracy. And that's a problem. See, you expect people who actually work in government to understand the spirit of the law, not just the letter of the law. Like, you know, you call a government office, you expect your frontline person to be a bureaucrat. Sorry, this is the rule we have. Sorry, that's the rule we have. And I'm very sorry, that's the rule we have. And then you want to talk to a supervisor. And you want to eventually get to a point where the person says, okay, how can I help you? How can I work with this? You follow? Mm-hmm. But if you have artistry-minded people working at that level of government, it's all going to be, what does it say in the rule book? And you have to just do this. They can't actually work on principles. All right, artistry people working in government. So artistry people, they're into security, stability, the status quo. They'll sacrifice for the integrity of their craft and the quality of their craft. But they're into basic comforts. And in government, you have to be willing to sacrifice your life and limb to save people. So if people with the mentality of artistry work into government, they're going to be, again, prime candidates for corruption. If someone says, you know, here's a nice, comfortable life, here's some perks from government, don't do anything risky. Okay, fine. When government people work in artistry, you have the opposite problem. Do you want high, risk-taking people doing your electrical wiring? Right? They're not going to make good plumbers or electricians. You want high-risk people doing your accounting. All right? We have the same problem as with ideas. People with the mentality of government working in artistry, they're going to have a very hard time pleasing customers and clients. That'll show up as failure to meet deadlines, procrastination, insubordination, just basically a lack of smooth working. Sometimes people with the mentality of government working in artistry, they'll be more concerned with like some justice or people's working conditions, and they'll neglect the craft. They're just crossing resources in artistry. So what's the saying here? Oh, what's similar? To some extent, though artistry more, but they're both meeting the practical needs of society. Yes. Okay, and what's different?
One is expensive and
One is expensive, one is sensible. Okay, when people with the mentality of resources work in artistry, they want to increase the quantity. They don't really understand the craft. So they will turn the craft into a factory, which then affects other people in the field of artistry, who can no longer keep doing their craft and be competitive. They start damaging the field as a whole. They'll create fast foods instead of good, healthy foods. Fashions that have to change every 2 months instead of clothing that's actually healthy for us and for the planet. Entertainment that instead of is full of interesting plots and character development and inspiring, it's just full of sex and violence to make money. Sports that instead of really getting into health and the value of the sport are just fueled by drugs and cheating. When people with the mentality of artistry work in resources, they're going to find it very difficult to have this expansive mood. They're happy to have their own little bakery to sell their little stuff, but they really don't want to be franchised in all different places, and they just won't have the energy for it. And artistry people don't have the mood towards sustainable, regenerative wealth. So if they work in resources, they may neglect the care of the environment. They neglect the means for keeping wealth sustainable and regenerative. So we see that everything's beautiful in its own place, yes? Okay. So question, I went through this a little faster because we started a little late. Some people have to leave, and I'm sure many of you are hungry. So questions, comments, yes?
Again, it's kind of one that's more to do with our society and the way we view these things in the past, because I was thinking of the, that we're trying to, before, like as a society, we wanted to set up self-sufficient communities, and this is the only way in which fine ashram could actually be developed. Whereas this approach seems to be dealing with the situation that is there among all of us as devotees and also in the society. So is that the problem of having government kind of idea instead of ideas in working out what fine ashram is? Or?
Well, I think there was a number of problems with that. First of all, the last principle of career Dharma is sustainable prosperity. So linking economic theory and economic work to natural resources and to the land. And in our chapter about ashram, we particularly talk about how industrialization has damaged women's careers. So there's strong reasons why that if you really want to take all these principles of career Dharma and institute them in society, it would be easier in not such a heavily industrialized society. Industrialization mitigates against bringing these principles in on a large scale. But of course, in ancient society, there were also cities. It's not that everybody was out in the country. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada gave this emphasis on simple living as part of developing an ideal society. Having said that, a lot of the principles of career Dharma can be applied in any situation. And Prabhupada would often say that too. He'd say, never mind you're doing this, that, and the other. Learn how to do it for Krishna. So he would say both. Ideally, we set up societies that are working more in harmony with nature, but you can also do this in any society. The main problem I see with our trying to set up our own communities is that Srila Prabhupada said only the people in the field of government can institute varnashram. And it's that field in our ISKCON society that we have least, I would call, activated. I mean, when I joined the Hare Krishna movement, we had room for some work in the field of ideas and some work in the field of artistry, and everybody else was useless. And gradually, in the 90s, we decided that we needed money, and so we actually thought people and resources might be okay. They might not be just materialistic, greedy people. But we've never really made a place for people whose mentalities in the field of government. We just haven't done it. So most of our members who have that mentality, either they're pushed into ideas or resources, or they have jobs outside. But if we're going to build a community, it has to be managed by people who have the mentality of government. My personal conviction is that the legal institution of ISKCON should be managing maybe 1 or 2 model communities in the world. Next. And that our center should be more focused on ideas, just education and worship. And then we train people in these things and have them go out and do it. And one of the most extraordinary things we have in Career Dharma is, I think it's in part 3, we have, as I said, 9 testimonies in here. One of the most extraordinary, and I don't know why we didn't label it as testimony, is in part 3, chapter 34, training a leader and protector. And this is about a young devotee man who worked as a kshatriya and went to Africa and actually set up an ideal community in Africa using all of Srila Prabhupada's principles. We were seeing, I see a number of devotees who are naturally in the field of government, and they tend to do things somewhat independently from the legal institute of ISKCON that end up also serving ISKCON, like Jadamal Hari in Spain, for example. Rupa Bhaginath in Vrindavan. But, we haven't really, I know one ISKCON leader who says, we're establishing varnashram but no kshatriyas, and I thought, then it's doomed to failure. Prabhupada says, only those people can actually institute varnashram. Nobody else can do it. Those in the field of ideas can make the blueprint, but they can't do it. Does that help? What I'd like to see is some devotee community that decided, okay, we're going to actually institute this in our community. It would have to be something big enough that all 4 fields are active, but small enough so that it wouldn't be too cumbersome to institute it. And it would also have to be something where we don't have a whole lot of people who are firmly entrenched and invested in keeping things the way they are. I suggested this in Radhadesh, where Hridaya Chaitanya is very open to the idea. He said this should be taught to all the new bhaktas. So let's see. You have all the 4 fields working there. And it could be restructured to be in harmony with Shastra.
The more Kshatriya person, they would need to be in the community itself, like as per the community, or training them to go into the society to...
Both.
Yeah.
Both. My personal conviction is that Prabhupada primarily wanted us to train people to go into society and change society. Like Bhaktivinoda says, we want high court judges, those are in the field of government, or in Tiwa.
That's the impression I get hearing from Prabhupada, that varnashram is for the world, maybe for the devotees, but it's for the world.
It's the natural bridge to bhakti for the world. If you go to people and you say, I used to, as a new member of this kind, when I was wearing a saffron polycotton heavy pseudo-sari that had 25 pleats. It was so heavy it would drag on the floor, and the cloth was really heavy. And if we used a clip, it would have torn out our hair. I mean, we had to pin it with a safety pin over here, which meant you did this. You know, and big T-lock and big nose ring. Running up to people in Chicago's airport saying, "Would you like to take a magazine about love of God?" You know, most people don't wake up in the morning and say, "I'd really like to get a magazine about love of God." But the majority of people, if you say, "Would you like to have a means of livelihood that was the best expression of yourself and gave you the kinds of prosperity that enrich you and was that you could share with others and you could really make a contribution to society?" How many people would want that? I think almost everybody. And then as part of that, you have to do yoga. You know? As part of it, you have to go above the shades of ego. So it's the natural shastric bridge to bhakti. Ashram is not. Again, if you tried to teach ashram in the modern society, okay, people should get married and have babies and retire when they're 50, and our own members won't do that. This is not a very popular platform. Right? But the career Dharma, yes. It's the natural bridge. Who doesn't want peace and prosperity?
Like, is it possible in today's world, like the world outside is very competitive and there are so many industries and so many things. So even if there are so many devotees and they are working in the industries, they are forced to do multiple things and they are forced to be in all four fields. So most of the time,
I don't know those people are forced to be in all four fields. I think it would be extremely unusual.
That's why
I'm trying to think of what job would force you to work in all four fields.
It's like, that's why I think people are.
No, I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Like an IT consultant. You have to do consulting technically and you have to sell as well. You have to increase the revenue. That's the.
Are you instituting law and order in society?
No, but like.
Are you instituting law and order and justice in society?
But art is coming
Are
in.
you instituting law and order and justice in society?
So it might be not.
Are you instituting law and order and justice?
No, not law and
No.
order.
No. So you're not in government. Okay. Are you giving detached wisdom and truth to guide society in higher values? Thank you. Okay, so you're definitely not doing those two fields. Okay. It sounds to me like just plain old artistry.
But then control is part of government, right?
Aishwarya, did you come yesterday?
Yes.
Aishwarya you can have in any of the four fields. So government is the main control for society, but you can be a leader in any of the four fields. You can be heading up a school or a temple. You can be controlling the temple in ideas. You can be a leader in business, controlling business, and can also be in artistry as well. Usually that's on a smaller scale. Now there is a lot of corruption in the outside world. And the first 7 principles of career Dharma apply to ourselves. The last 2 apply to society. Can we do a lot by just applying it to ourselves in a corrupt society? Yes. Will it be perfect? No. And something very interesting that really made it clear to me that I'm in ideas and not in government. So I was giving this presentation in one temple, and there was a devotee. We were like a panel, and that devotee he's a leader in ISKCON, but his mentality is in government. And one devotee said, "How do I offer my work to Krishna?" And he said, "You can't. We have to have the system in place first. If we don't have the system in place and we don't have ideal communities, all you can do is give your money." And it was really hard for me to, and this devotee's a friend of mine, it was really hard for me to respond to them. You know, I said, well, what we're teaching is how you can follow most of these principles of career Dharma even in a misguided society. And after that I thought, this is the difference. Someone in the field of government, is if he thinks, well, people can follow these without a good system. Where's his enthusiasm? He's thinking, I have to make a good and proper system so people can actually follow these and be protected. You understand? Am I making sense to everybody? Yes? No? You're all tired? It's hot in here? Yes?
Yes.
Whereas I wasn't thinking like that. I'm thinking, yes, that would be ideal, but it's not necessary. Why? Because I'm not going to build that system. I'm not going to build that society. I can't. I could direct it. I could give a blueprint for it. I could give guidance for it. I'm not going to want to build it. If I tried to, I would just be, my mind would drive me nuts. But why am I doing this? Why is someone else doing this? Why am I doing this? Why can't I do what I want to do?
Just another thing with corruption, if you look at the society today, the way it's built, like I live in Cloney over Ongards, it's a kind of they're building more and more houses and houses. And I was thinking, like from what we were talking about yesterday, that these people, oh my God, they're doing amazing things, but they're able to set up all the systems for these buildings to work, 10 new 10-story buildings right next to the train station, and the schools are here, and they're putting things here. And I'm thinking, why are they putting them in these little boxes? These boxes, and they're trying to make this is make you happy. You'll be very happy here in these places. And I'm just trying to, it's so incongruous to me. Just after practicing, trying to follow Krishna consciousness for many years, that we seem to be rapidly going in a even though they have the skills and the abilities to do them, they're just, it's very impossible almost to stop them doing it and try to get them in the right direction. I know that I'm kind of making value judgments there, but according to Krishna conscious values, and people are getting more and more, entrenched in creating further.
I see things going in two directions simultaneously. I see society becoming more and more degraded and exploited. And I also see that more and more people are becoming interested in Eastern ways of thought, in Eastern wisdom. More and more people are getting interested in meditation. More and more people are getting interested in Dhyan Yoga. Dhyan Yoga is huge. So Dhyan Yoga or meditation is huge, and Dhyan Yoga, being detached, being philosophical about your thoughts, feelings, huge. Both of these are making big inputs into both physical and mental health. And people are very much accepting that just like you should exercise every day, you should meditate every day. They might not be doing it, but they're accepting it as a norm. That was not true when I was a kid. Look at the surge in vegetarianism and veganism. Huge. Again, when I was growing up, that didn't exist. There's trends in society, and people are becoming much more ecologically conscious. I mean, when I was a teenager, I was in a protest march in favor of the environment, and it was considered seditious. Chemistry was going to save the world. We're all going to go into outer space like Star Trek and have their computers synthesize food sources. Why should we have to grow anything? So, things are shifting. So they're shifting in both directions simultaneously. My personal belief is that the widespread distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books and Prasadam and Harinam has something to do with the positive direction. Maybe I'm just in some sort of illusion. But I would like to think that we've had something to do with it. And people are eager for some sort of alternative. Can we do it? I don't know. Mahaprabhu said that somehow it's going to happen. So maybe we can be part of that. I'm still hopeful. I'm not quite as naive as I was the day I walked in the Hare Krishna temple where I thought we were going to change the world in a week. by running around the airport in polycotton cloth selling back to Godhead magazines. So I'm not quite at that level of naivete. But I'm still very, very, very hopeful.
Yeah, we have to be very, positive in thinking that the future generations they will do better than what we are doing nowadays. Otherwise, what is the use to live?
There you go.
Think about that. There is no use. If you don't think about that, the prosperity that the future generation they will do better than what we are doing.
Okay, we've had now a number of youngish people who've read the book and taken some of these courses who are now starting to teach it, starting to propagate it, starting to integrate it into their own platforms for preaching and teaching. Ruchir and I would like to see that every temple eventually has like a career Dharma guidance center for people to help the devotees, to help the public, that we can eventually train coaches and trainers in the system, and that maybe it can become at least one of the dominant systems in the world for career guidance. Ultimately, it has to come to government. Ultimately, it would have to be some government that actually takes it on. That's all this is.
There's one example in America at the moment where they're creating a whole village that allows the very rich people, like the guys who did strike and LinkedIn, the head guys that have made all the money, but they've bought up a huge amount of land in California, I think it is, and they're trying to create an ideal village there at the moment. So we can see that the tendency is there for
Yes.
that.
Yes, there's definitely an interest.
Yeah.
There's unquestionably an interest and a yearning. This is the last one, then we should start.
Can you explain about the leaders of a particular field to the Dharma is different, let's say artistry leaders? Is their Dharma different from somebody who is an artistry and just a worker?
No, they're the same Dharma, it's just they have a different prosperity type.
So you just have Aishwarya along with all the other perspectives of that.
All right, well, thank you very much. There's a Sanskrit verse which I haven't yet memorized, but it goes something like, whatever's good from here is due to my gurus, whatever's bad from here is due to me. Please take the good and ignore the bad. And I think we still have a couple books left. If you're interested, you can see mine. Srila Prabhupada ki